Hey, it's Wednesday, time for our couples devotional, Galatians 5. We're going to look at the fruit of the Spirit, gentleness. You know, in marriage, good, healthy marriages are those where spouses are able to speak truth into each other's lives, that you're able to speak the last 10%, you know, the kind of stuff that you wouldn't normally tell just a stranger or a neighbor, but you would tell your spouse, hopefully. And if your marriage is anything like ours, I know my wife isn't afraid to tell me the last 10%, and she does it gently. And actually, we see this modeled in Jesus in John chapter 4, where Jesus is speaking to the woman at the well. Let me set this up for you. Jesus had gone through Samaria, and he came to a town there, into a well, Jacob's well, and he sat down about noon, and a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" And the Samaritan woman answered, "You're a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" Because that wasn't normal. First of all, a guy wouldn't usually talk to a woman, and certainly a Jew wouldn't talk to a Samaritan. And look at how Jesus answered, and you can go ahead and pause that and read that if you want, but we're going to actually go down a little bit further because we're going to look and see how Jesus calls some sin out in her life.
So we see Jesus say to the woman, "Go, call your husband and come back, and I'll tell you more about this living water." And of course, her reply is, "Well, I don't have a husband." And then Jesus goes on to say, "Well, you're right when you say that you don't have a husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you've said is quite true." So as the reader, we might look at that and say, well, that's odd why Jesus was speaking to her that way and the way he kind of led her to that place. But I think the bigger lesson for us to take from that is Jesus was very gentle in his way of leading this woman to a place of calling out sin in her life, that he didn't just come right at her and say, "You've had several men and you're a floozy," in our words, in our culture today, that he kind of led her to that place and was gentle to bring her to that realization. And then he goes on to talk about that she doesn't have to be that person anymore. So let's transition for a second and look at that in your own marriage. And when I look at it in my marriage, I can be frustrated with Brian on certain areas or things that maybe he struggles in his ability to pay attention to me, or we've talked about love languages before. Is he speaking my language?
This is all hypothetical.
Yeah. And I of course, I too have my times of not meeting Brian's needs. But the point is, when those things occur, we can either be hard charging and come at one another and be critical and make accusations, or we can choose to be gentle and to come to our spouse and to say it in a more roundabout way, but directly, that we're not assuming the worst of their intentions, but we can say, "Hey, this is really bothering me," or "I feel like you're missing the mark in this." And I think having the fruit of the Spirit of gentleness is such an important thing for us to have in marriage, because I don't think any of us are going to respond well to people that come at us in an attacking way, much like the woman at the well. I'm not sure what her response would have been to Jesus, if she would have cared to learn more about the living water if he had just come hard charging at her. So pay attention to that in your marriage. Take some time to talk. Are we gentle with one another? Can we give each other the last 10% in things, and are we open to that? And how can we be better about packaging that message? Not from a place of criticism, but more from a place of gentleness. And I think you will see that great things can happen in those conversations.